Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Welcome to today's Rethink Leadership podcast with my guest, Niki Avraam, a legal entrepreneur driven by a passion for reshaping the professional landscape. With a background in employment and discrimination law, she embraces the ethos of forging new paths and inspiring others to do the same. Raised in a family of small business owners, Niki brings a blend of creativity and business acumen to her ventures. Her journey has seen her litigate high-profile cases, advise businesses through growth and adversity, and advocate for workplace cultures built on purpose and fulfilment. Her mission is to empower individuals to find meaning and satisfaction in their work, and we talk about this at length. Hi, Niki. Thanks very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself, your career, and those leadership lessons that guide you in your business now.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. I'm Niki Avraam, and I am dedicated, obsessed probably, with transforming the way that we work so that we exceed our potential and we're ready for the future of work, which is now. I think one of the biggest challenges that organisations and individuals are facing is a lack of motivation and engagement, which is tragic. That can be crippling. And why I care is that we all deserve to feel invigorated and engaged by the work that we do. It bleeds into every aspect of life. I would take higher engagement over higher retention any day. And the way that I help organisations and individuals feel invigorated, engaged, which makes organisations thrive, is through empowering them to work more with ownership and agency, autonomy, work beyond their comfort zone in what I call their preferred discomfort. And that's the key to making everyone win, which in turn makes everyone thrive. And everything I talk about is derived from my experiences, my journeys from being a lawyer in a bigger law firm and really having that need, that want for agency and autonomy and that need for impact, onto running my own law firm, which I founded 10 years ago, not lawyering anymore. But in that, I recognized the need for others to work with agency and autonomy. I found out that I wasn't that unique. And that led to great work. That led to people innovating, pushing boundaries, and that in turn caused the organization to thrive.
There's a lot already that you've put on the table here, which I could kind of go down a rabbit hole in, I have to say, because you're talking my language in a lot of ways, and that obsession with the way that we work, engagement over retention is a really interesting one for me, because you've got also a set of new workers coming into the workforce that says, I don't necessarily want a career for life, I want to be fulfilled. That's all about that engagement, but it challenges sort of the, how we set up traditional businesses for sure. And I also get behind very strongly this sense of autonomous empowerment and taking ownership. So I'll come to the ownership culture that you mentioned in a little while, but I just want to pick your brains, talking about your discipline and your industry, in an industry or a sector that is fairly traditional, and therefore when we consider the way we work, we've got to wrap that together with digital transformation, workforce transformation, the need for leaders to know a lot of different things, so that they can advise clients in your sector differently as well. So as a traditional sector, the legal sector, if you like, how are the best leaders that you come across, and I include yourself in this, transforming their organizations for a digital world? And what will the clients see differently in a 21st century law firm than a 20th century law firm, if that makes sense?
Yeah, there's so much in what you just said. I'm going to correct you on one thing. You said fairly traditional. The legal industry has been very traditional and very conventional I believe that we can smash conventions, change the way that we work in any industry, because I've done it in the legal industry and now I'm doing it outside of that with other organizations across the board. And it's interesting what you say, the technological shifts in the world that we're in, the demography shifts, we can no longer work in the way that we were working. It's got to be about a matrix of skills and characteristics, and those have to be transferable. People will have to pivot more. So therefore, and you mentioned people not wanting necessarily that fixed trajectory. So what's the best way to enable people to move forward in the way that they want, and therefore to make organizations thrive? It's that collaboration. It's to align strengths, visions, goals of the individual with those of the organization. And it's that coming together. And this notion of a job role is so important. And I got that from my own background in law, to as working for bigger organizations and building my own departments, to running a law firm, and recognizing that if you do that collaborative piece, and if you work together with individuals and they move forward, they then feel that they have a personal stake in the success and the well-being of the organization. Even looking at, AI and the way we integrate that has to be involved in the job crafting. So knowledge workers, lawyers, and all knowledge workers beyond that, can look at how they're going to adjust and adopt those tools so that they can augment people and the way that they're working, so that they can augment the organization in the right way. You have to take people on that journey. I really learned that throughout my career. With any change, any transformation, whether it is the transference of those essential skills or the uptake of any technology, including AI, you take people on that journey for that change. You tell them why we need to change. What do you guys think about it? How's it going to affect you? Are you happy with the trajectory that's taking?
Yeah, it is ultimately, in a digital world, a human endeavor. And you're using, as you rightly said, you're using tools like generative AI to unleash that human potential with clients, not just in the legal sector, but in customers in other sectors too, but also internally. And it does take in an industry which is, let me stand corrected, very traditional. It does take the need to smash conventions, as you talk about it, to get that aligned collaboration. Everyone has a stake, that ownership again. And I guess that brings me back to that point that you were making before, which I'd like to understand a little bit more of, in terms of what are those pillars associated with an ownership culture that drive this greater engagement of the workforce that you've been talking about, to ensure that individuals and organizations exceed their potential, not just meet it.
Yeah, it's important that individuals exceed their potential so that organizations can exceed their potential. And the whole thing of ownership culture and the specific pillars around that, they're all joined together by the recognition that in order for people to feel happy, what elicits joy, that is control. A bunch of studies have showed that. But PwC did a study which showed that most people would sacrifice 20% of salary in exchange for more control over what they do, over how they work. And that's across any area of life, right? That study also talks about learned helplessness. Powerlessness can be debilitating. So if you take all of that into the workplace, job crafting is a very necessary part of the ownership culture, of how we exceed that potential, because then we're on control. We're going in the same direction. Organization, individual is going down the same pathway. We are custodians as managers, as leaders. We are custodians of people's professional growth and their forward motion. And people need that to feel invigorated. And if we don't take account of their individual skill, their vision, not only does that lead to a lack of diversity in the workforce, but also you're missing out on that gold dust. As a lawyer, it was never about just my technical ability. I married that, and I've seen this with other people, I married that with my understanding of how to serve clients, how to deliver that service, and also being innovative as a lawyer. You join all those things together, you got a superpower. And that's true of any organization. And that's what pushes organizations forward. And having and creating that safe to fail environment is so crucial. If you have the strong, actionable principles as an organization, which are underpinned by values, people are then clear about where they fit and they can be autonomous. Spotify talks about the alignment principle. So the more aligned people are with the goals, the more autonomy is enabled, is released. And therefore they can produce great work. They can decide how they reach that end goal. And that also engenders an ability for people to exercise that muscle, that working beyond their comfort zones, what I call preferred discomfort. It's the intentional pushing boundaries purposefully. And it doesn't have to be big steps. It can be small steps for rejigging your routine, which I did back in the day when my day-to-day was very structured. I did that so I could feel a bit more engaged. And if organizations support that, particularly in the world that we're in, where things are changing, job titles that were there a year ago are becoming obsolete, and that will keep on happening. Doesn't mean that people are obsolete, doesn't mean their skills are obsolete. You can transfer those. And if we encourage that collective adaptability, people can move within organizations, outside of organizations. There's still I think it's at 10 to 20% of it's as low as that in terms of people within an organization not being transferred across to other roles. We need to build that internal labor market. That's so important. Ogilvy, the advertising agency, talks about that quiet hiring. And yeah, I talk about higher engagement is better than higher retention, but it's great if we can keep that turnover low as well, and that people feel that they can maneuver and feel innovative and feel engaged and invigorated in the same organization. And that need to be agile, which is the third pillar. I wrote a piece called The Authenticity Trap, which sort of surprised some people because there's so much talk about authentic leadership, and that's great. Leading in a way that's genuine, that's honest, that's transparent, but not if it brings about excessive rigidity in that, we're leading in a way that was us yesterday. We need to wear different hats, try on different outfits in order to figure out what type of leader, what type of innovator, what type of disruptor do we want to be. And that, again, that safe to fail environment that organizations can create, and the promotion of that means that people can transfer, they can move, they can feel agile and supported in doing that, and not necessarily having to stick with that fixed trajectory. This is about people bringing their individuality to work without feeling that they're sort of working in their silos. And we can talk about the way that I've brought that to light with various, call them stories, the leadership lessons series that I've developed, which is really about using our bank of wisdom and applying it to work throughout that career journey. This work-life balance, I've always struggled with that, because I think one platform, personal, professional, can serve the other, as opposed to them being at cross purposes. We can bring our learnings from life and apply them to work. And that brings about a heightened cultural intelligence. That brings about a diversity in workforce. And that makes for a great environment. That leads to innovation, great work, and breakthroughs.
And there's quite a lot in there, really. And if
yes.
I just pick
out a mouthful, sorry.
Let me just pick out a couple of things here, because at the heart of an ownership culture is the fact that we are empowering people to go beyond a job description, which takes away almost that point that you're making about we've got these rigid roles. It might not be the exact role in 12 months' time. And if people have more freedoms to cross borders, if you like, internally, metaphorically,
Nicely put.
then we're creating that ecosystem where actually we're all in it together, and that's it. And that is where it underpins that cultural element. You've got the culture building that goes with it, the evolved culture, the evolved values, joint values and behaviors that mean it becomes, to go back to the point, that one of the points that you made earlier, that autonomous collaboration, or and great collaboration across the organization, which is almost viral rather than pushed,
Mm.
whereby then the leaders and managers can become less supervisors and more supporters of that, as coaches, as mentors, on a platform of psychological safety, which is what you've also mentioned here, so that everybody feels safe to experiment, to fail a bit, to succeed, to learn, to grow, all of those kind of things. Very much heart of the growth mindset, I guess, in some way. There is one point I just want to come back on, though. And it was quite at the beginning, you were talking about leaders being custodians of people's growth. And you are a very enlightened leader. You learn yourselves, you're challenging yourself as a leader. But there are many leaders out there, Niki, who have potentially a much steeper learning curve than even their people. And there is a mindset shift that needs to happen, as well as then getting to action. So who need to be the custodians of a leader's growth? Is it themselves? Is it the organization up the line kind of putting pressure on? Is it the board? Who is it?
That's a really difficult question, because it's difficult to create that accountability, isn't it? When you feel like that you're at the top of the food chain, and yeah, well, I don't have to answer to anyone. And what about those guys those guys and gals who are doing that sort of real top-down leadership, which I, by the way, have done in the past, and I've learned from that, become an empower and enabler. I think that we've got different levels in different organizations. They're operating so many different ways, but we need to create systems where we have almost kind of pods of people that keep each other accountable. And they don't necessarily have to be led per se in every sector. And that's pulling away a bit more from that hierarchical structure. But also, I think that there is a need for accountability to come from those that we might have previously regarded as being, I don't know, the bottom or middle of the food chain. There is a demand for change across the board, and it's led at some points by the changing economy and the changing labour market. But I think there is less appetite for that old style of top-down, almost dictatorial leadership. That stifles growth. I think we've got no option other than to change the way that we lead, to become those custodians, become empowerers and enablers of people's career growth, relationships, and to go on that journey with them. Otherwise, if they don't progress, the organization doesn't progress. And everyone's stifled, the organization's stifled by the way it's always been done. That's what I really mean by smashing those conventions. We need to change that whole structure and mindset across the board. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and for some organizations who are still locked in 20th century legacy, the biggest movement needed is at the top, generally, to kind of take that away and adopt the almost these new principles that support what you're talking about, which is like a more horizontal management principles coming in place to support rather than supervise, do all of those kind of things. But yes, we could talk quite a lot about that in some ways, and I think it's the leaders like you who are going to just have the competitive advantage out there. So it is as fundamental as leaders need to change, otherwise they're going to go out of date, and if you're out of date in this day and age, you're going to fail.
Yeah, undoubted. And this is not just in terms of even demography and looking at it from a generational perspective. It's not just the sort of Gen Zers coming in fresh and wanting a whole different way of working. We have to look at what can be gained from different generations. The older workers are now wanting to work in a different way, and there's wisdom that can be gleaned. Again, we take those people on a journey, technological and everything else, in a different way. We communicate in a different way, and we get so much advantage from those different generations collaborating and working together. There is a want, need, appetite across the board for people to work in a different way. I think that drives a lot of change. You know, when I give talks to universities who perhaps they've had part-time jobs, they perhaps haven't been in the workforce, you know, on a sort of real more intense full-time level. I say to them, look, I feel like I've had a Gen Z head on my aging shoulders for years because of this want to disrupt, innovate. I'm not a Gen Z, I'm not even a millennial, but I think that's the way the world is shifting, and we need to shift with that. Otherwise, organizations will be left behind.
You're absolutely right. And as an enlightened leader, you are also very clear that sense of evolved leadership comes with a strong purpose underpinning everything. You're very passionate about that, about purpose-driven entrepreneurship, business leadership. Could you explain in your words that a little bit more and how it manifests itself in your business and you as a leader?
Yeah, it's, you know, that's a core. Your purpose is your core and what drives you through everything. So even as a younger lawyer, if I look at my own journey, I rejected a lot of the conventional roles that were on the table, and I chose to build employment and discrimination departments. It was a new practice area, and I got a lot of resistance for that. I got support as well, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I also got resistance because it wasn't what a typical younger lawyer was doing. I was lawyering and business developing, and innovating and holding seminars and sort of moving sideways. My job role was very different to those of my peers, and people weren't comfortable with that. But what kept me motivated and forward thinking, it was my purpose and my motivation to work in that different way, to look at providing a service, being an officer of the court, but also providing a service to people. So therefore, we had to go above and beyond, and that enriched the organization and its workforce and its clients. And if you keep on collaborating with people, individuals, holding those meetings, being interested, having your ear open to their vision, their strength, their career goals, and you go alongside them in that journey, you will be aware of their purpose. And it is much easier, therefore, to align the two. And that's where the magic happens. That's where you get great work. And that's where you get some unexpected outcomes that can benefit an organization.
Yeah, it's you reminded me of something. You talked about Spotify before, and somebody in Spotify that I know as well, when I was talking to her about things like this, she used almost the same word. She said, yeah, it's in the chaos often that the magic can happen. As you put all of this into the melting pot, you put the purpose driven, you put the need, how do you want to be fulfilled, what's your rejects, and mix it all up and see what comes out. And that rips apart that blueprint that you were talking about before, about that very rigid traditional business and traditional job roles, and it does let us fly a little bit. So yeah, I think that's really kind of nicely put on that. I'm sure those tuning in will kind of think, right, okay, there's a lot to live up to here, Niki, hearing you speak. So if I could sort of take some of your learnings, say, well, if there are 4 or 5 traits of modern leaders like you or those that you admire, what would they be, and how do those tuning in kind of move the dial and make progress across those?
I almost don't want to say it because it's such an overused word. It's collaboration is one of the key principles. That's what I've admired in the past. If I look at my own mentors, you know, why I was able to, I call it smash conventions in the legal industry, because I had those mentors that they could see my potential, they could see how it could enrich the organization, they could see what my vision, what my strengths were. So we went on that journey together. And if I had just gone along, you know, with the usual trajectory and I had accepted those roles, what would have happened? I would have been disengaged at a much earlier stage. And that is so problematic. This thing of disengagement got diagnosed, I read, in the 1990s by a guy, William Kahn, Boston University. 3 decades later, it's still rampant. there's what was it? 59%, the Gallup study showed that, yeah, 59% of people feel disengaged. That's like the quiet quitting. They're kind of working at mediocre pace. 18% feel highly disengaged. They are intentionally going against the organization. That's sabotage. That's crippling. We've got no option other than to work in this different way. But sorry, I'm diverging. I'm sort of going sideways a bit. But yes, collaboration is key. The taking on the journey, as simple as it sounds. If we are going to change, if we are going to augment through AI, and we're going to do that in the right way, in the best way for the organization and its people, we have to take those people along the journey. And it's not just leaders surrounding themselves with a select few managers who are kind of the transformation experts. This is about taking everyone on the journey. Otherwise, what happens? That can become debilitating. People start making up their own stories, right? If you're not transparent about what you're doing, the purpose and the vision behind it, how it's going to impact people, and you're honest with them to that degree, then they will become disengaged, and they will sort of, you know, they will imagine so much worse than what's actually going on. So the taking on the journey, I've always admired the more transparent, and I have to say honest style of leadership. And that's not coming to work every day and talking about your every kind of aspect of your personal life, crying at your desk. This is about an open and honest, treating everyone as your colleagues. Look, guys, we're going through a difficult time. If that's the case, let's see how we can pull through it. This is how I think we can get out. What do you guys think? You know, I always had, I guess, less respect for those leaders who were more, you know, putting on that brave face when you knew that not everything was okay. So I've always tried to embody that. It's the respect for people and their intelligence, and it's also, you know, you find solutions through that collaboration. Another great trait, and this is probably the last one I could think of on the spot, but the last trait is the ability to gain outsight and to use it in the right way. That means working outside your comfort zone as a leader. You know, what was my comfort zone? I worked in the legal profession for years. And I fought those cases. I knew how to fight them. Going outside of that, doing things like building a personal brand and being comfortable with those different platforms and not always wanting to be or having to be the perennial expert. That means going to different people, different communities, and gaining outside from different industries, people that are not like-minded. I've come to not like that term. I used to use it a lot, but like-minded isn't always good. We need that diversity of thought, and we can bring that outside into our own organizations, into our own learning. And again, that's what brings that diversity, that innovation, that great work that perhaps we didn't even anticipate.
So great. And it all starts like well, in some ways, actually, it all starts with what you've told me a few times here, which is be prepared to smash conventions and be prepared to make the change or lead the change within the organization. And that can come from any level. Let's not just rely on the leaders to do it. And then if we're doing it together, being engaged, mobilized, collaborative, open and honest with our communications, using data and insights to kind of make decisions, and investing in ourselves as we grow and investing in others, then, you know, all of that actually, all of that can, like you talk about, you can achieve great things. That's where the magic happens, as you talked about before.
Yeah.
So it's been a fascinating discussion, Niki, and I'm sure those who are listening in will want to connect with you, find out more. How do they do that?
So I live at nikiavraam.com, Niki 1K Avraam.com. That's where you can find me. On there is the leadership lesson series I've spoken about, bookings for keynotes, masterclasses, and workshops, which are around the main pillars of the ownership culture. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram mainly. Those are my two main platforms.
Well, thank you so much for a stimulating discussion. And we covered quite a lot of areas around leadership, but also executing leadership in the modern world. And I absolutely love that. So, Niki Avraam, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. Please like, comment, and support us on your favourite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.